Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a bunch of rejects with us and a returning guest, Aleksander. It was an awesome guest the last time we had him on, and I really wanted to get him on again, and we already got other topics for him to talk about, so this should be fun, and get used to it. He'll be on again. But before we introduce him, let me introduce the rejects. We got Julia back with us today. What is going on, Julia? It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I am meeting Aleksander for the first time today, so excited to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you. And we got Ethan Indigo. What is going on, sir? How are you?
Peace on earth. Honored to be here with everyone. Great to learn what Aleksander has to say today. And I'm on all the usual social media, easy to find. Thanks, Nick, and everyone.
Of course. No, thank you for making it, my man. And we got my boy Tyrone. What is going on, sir? How are you?
What's going on? This is like the fourth or fifth time I've done talked to Aleksander. It's always a pleasure to
or even more.
Very intelligent. Yeah, right. It's always an awesome time to sit back and listen to what he has to share from his through his journey of educating himself and so on and so forth. Everything you can find on myself is on rebirthoftheword.com. I also have a book, Journey Through the Origins of History, that's on Amazon. Of course, I knew that some people would forget. Yep, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. I got Ethan's book right here, How to Meditate, The Geometry of Energy, How to Meditate. Got to get his book. Nice. And then, of course, I got Aleksander's book right here.
I got that too.
But I appreciate it, and I'm ready to get it started.
Hell yeah. No, thank you. I'm glad you joined us. And we got the Headless Giant. What is going on, bud?
How you doing, everybody? It's beautiful Saturday. I'm glad to be on here with Aleksander. He sounds like a legend. I can't believe I've been sleeping on this. I'm ready to see it. You can find me on YouTube and X. Look for Headless Giant. And if you have any weird occult stories, you can send them to my email at theheadlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and we will read those out on Thursday nights. So check that out. Thank you.
Hell yeah.
And we got trialogues tomorrow with Ethan, so it's going to be good.
Hell yeah. Definitely check out the trialogue. And if you got any stories for Headless, throw in your address in there and I'll send you some free stickers for the story. So make it worth your while to send an email. All right. Jin the Ninja, what is going on, Friday?
Hey boss, what's up? Mr. 93. Okay, so if you want to follow me, I'm at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. That's my personal account on Twitter, or you can follow the show at Threshold Saints, Apple and Spotify, and all your podcast providers. My episode with J. David Osborne will, I think, drop tonight. I think that's what I set it for. So yeah, that's happening. And then also thank you so much for inviting me. And then also it's my second time speaking with Aleksander. And I want to also shout out, of course, the Grey Lodge, which is kind of taking off. So we do have a YouTube channel now, and we do big spaces, and we get really good numbers. So if you're interested in speculative ontology, speculative Gnosticism, speculative Kalachakra, which is basically just Tantra. But if you're interested in those, yes, you can subscribe to the Grey Lodge YouTube channel, and all of our episodes are uploaded, including Aeon of the Daughter. So awesome. Great work to the boys there. And yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you.
Of course. No, thank you. People definitely go check out his Grey Lodge stuff. I highly suggest it. Before we introduce the guest, though, I did want to bring up, I had mentioned before about the free stickers with Headless. I got free stickers for people if they want any. If you can see them too well up there, I'll send those out for you. We got t-shirts that have that and the Silent Rainbow logo on them as well that I'm selling to try to help with the events that we have that I'll list real quick. We got a bunch of events that the Occult Rejects will be at. Tyrone will be there at most of them, and hopefully some other rejects might show up at the other ones. Fingers crossed. October 4th, we got a Bigfoot thing at the factory in Franklin, North Carolina. We'll be there. October 18th, we got Charlie's Beyond Belief, and that is in Fort Myers, Florida, and it's at a Masonic Lodge, and we are booth number 33. I had to pick that one. So, yeah, they let us pick our booths. I was like, of course I'm going to pick 33. It was either that or 17. So, yeah, we got that booth, and that's, yeah, October 18th in Fort Myers again, Charlie's Beyond Belief, and then October 25th and 26th will be in Arkansas, and that will be at the Paranormal Expo. It's supposed to be like the biggest yearly thing for the paranormal in Arkansas. That is 2 days. We'll be there then. And then there's one confirmed for the 22nd. That is another UFO thing, and that will be in Mooresville, North Carolina at the Army National Guard. There's two other ones, but I don't have like definite addresses, but those are definite. We'll have a booth there. Tyrone will probably be at most of them except for maybe the Arkansas thing. Jules may make it from he said, he's going to try to make it. He lives not too far away. So, yeah, fingers crossed. There'll be a few other rejects there besides me. And these are all cheap events. They're like $10 or $15 each. So even if you don't like us, you can show up to tell us to go fuck off for $10. So, or even put it this way, they're so cheap that if the speakers suck, you could just hang out with us at the booth for a while. There you go. So regardless, I think it's worth it if you're in the area. Now I'm going to shut up, and we're going to bring on Aleksander. And real quick, he did send me his book. Very nice guy. He sent me, wait, I got to close this note tab out. There we go. Yeah, he sent me this book. I just got it a few days ago. That's what's up. I'm definitely going to check it out. Thank you, Aleksander. And please let everybody know what your deal is for the people that don't know who you are.
Yes, my name is Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, and I'm from Poland. We would say, researcher, and I'm an author. This book that I've sent you, originally in Polish, was written by me just at the age of 17. And then, because of the law, I needed to wait until the 18th birthday to publish it. So it was published first in Poland at my age of 18. And then I translated it into English at 19. So it was, many people say, early journey into all of that. But still, it's, a full book, no like just some short crap. Like nowadays, Amazon and other platforms are flooded with some short AI crap. No, it was even before the age of AI. AI, I think 2 years or 3 years ago appeared. So it was before that. And my first interest was history, lost history, how it really turned out, lost civilizations. Could there be something before, the alleged first civilizations like ancient Sumer, Egypt, and India? But I went beyond it because in order to understand history, you need also other branches of science and a lot of knowledge from other sources, other types of knowledge, not only historical ones. So I branched out, and I would say that nowadays I'm concerned with the biggest mysteries of the entire universe, existence, whatever you may call, and that's why in the previous episode we talked about lost civilizations and stuff like that about my book, but in this one we will talk a little bit about science, about universe, about reality, how it all works, how science, like in the title of our conversation, is limited to a very large extent. What does it mean? What does it imply? And many other stuff. But I will also talk about history today. It wouldn't be only about science. And actually, when I started going, because as I mentioned, I started with history, I was going to plenty of competitions. I even had, some kind of places like top 10 in these competitions, which were regional, like an entire district of Poland. And I needed to learn a lot about our history. And when I was reading that, learning that, I started questioning stuff. Is it really like that? Was ancient Sumer really the first civilizations? And why are scientists, skeptics telling us that, any idea of previous civilizations or humanity being much older than ancient Sumer is ridiculous according to them? So I started researching, and in order to find out why they are thinking like that, that no, Atlantis didn't exist, and Lemuria is some pseudoscientific BS and so on, I needed to learn about science. I needed to learn about history from philosophical perspective, the methodology behind history, how we know so much about our history and so on. So that's how I started to be interested in science, because I found out that science is very, very misunderstood nowadays, at least in general public, and science seems in all, I would even say propaganda, or in all types of promotions of science, seems to be like a pristine method of uncovering the truth, the real truth about the world. And anything besides science, as I mentioned, is called pseudoscience, some, crap, some kind of scam, and so on and so on. So this science is being positioned in the media, in the educational system, and in our day-to-day lives as, the ultimate method of discovering, let's say, truth. This is how science is presented to us, and how many people believe science is. And we learn more about science, how it can actually tell us a lot about the physical universe, or it is on the blink of discovering the ultimate theory of everything, of how the entire universe and reality works. But this saying was there, I think, since the 80s or 60s, and we are in 2025. So, it's another thing. But this is the picture that we are being, informed about it. This is the only thing that comes to the truth. And if anyone isn't a scientist, he's a scammer, pseudoscientist, so parascientist even. And all of those people are saying or are telling people this is all BS and not truth. And only science has, I would say, the monopoly on truth. And I think that this is the bad thing about science, that science should be about, getting the knowledge about the world, going to the truth, or to the information that is true, that, is represented truly in the reality. But science is becoming a monopoly on knowledge. And this is a bad thing. And, in the Western world, so because I come from Poland, so a little bit still Eastern, we have a lot of Eastern influences here, or we had in the past. And I would say in the Western world, at least nowadays, maybe not in the past, science is only the science we are talking about, scientific research, scientific journals, scientific articles, physics, biology, chemistry. But here in Poland, still up until today, the word science in our language is nauka, and this word, which is science, does not mean the science like biology, physics, and all of these genres of science. No, it means just acquiring knowledge. So here in Poland, we still have, I think, the best definition, in my opinion, of science, that science should be about acquiring knowledge. If, let's say right now, I had no information, not knowledge about anything, and I was just sitting here, and no previous information, no memory, and I would want to start from scratch, I wouldn't assume anything. I would go, okay, this is like that, let's see, let's experiment, and so on, and it would be a free one. And this is how science actually started. But then, step by step, I think it became more and more limited, and I will show you today why it became more and more limited. And as I mentioned, this example, that I'm sitting here and I want to get the knowledge about the world, the truth, let's say, or just how the universe existence around me is. I wouldn't assume anything that, okay, only white exists but black no, only white things exist. No, I wouldn't assume that if I wanted the truth about the entire workings of our reality. Or I wouldn't say, oh, only, let's say, living organisms exist, but unalive stuff like rocks, there doesn't exist. No, I wouldn't say that. But actually, science is based on something like that. And this is called assumptions of science. So the main assumptions, as I mentioned, assumption can be, okay, if I want to discover the reality, I would say one assumption, reality exists. Because if I assume that reality doesn't exist, so what I am searching for, what I am measuring, let's say, what I am experimenting about, it would be illogical. So we need some assumptions. We cannot have zero assumptions. This is the philosophy of science. But science started having more and more assumptions as it grew. As I mentioned, the first one would be just things exist, and let's say, I will try to figure out what the entire reality is all about. But then science introduced more and more assumptions, which were more and more limiting. And just as things exist, I am limiting the idea that things doesn't exist, that it is all illusion, etc. But then,
Alexander, so you're talking more about theory of science, right? So
philosophy of science,
right? The philosophy of science goes into this stuff, but it gets rarely examined by the general public. They're not thinking about philosophy of science. They're looking at the end goal of it, and instead they've ignored the beginning part of it.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about, that we are giving this image to the general public that science is all about discovering the truth. But what I want to show you, all of you, that science actually at its philosophical core isn't about that we think, oh, science is about understanding the reality or about acquiring the knowledge of truth and so on and so on. No. And as I mentioned, the first assumption would be things exist. It should be needed in order to get the things, to measure the things, let's say, and do anything with them. So I am first limiting that, okay, things cannot non-exist. Let's say it cannot be that there is nothing in the universe, because we see, okay, things exist. But then there are limitations and other assumptions in science, like for instance, naturalism, or sometimes called materialism. But to be precise philosophically for skeptics, it is called naturalism. And it says that all the natural things, so all the things we see naturally that are occurring in our reality, have natural causes. So in short, there is nothing supernatural in the world. There aren't supernatural causes of natural things. Like the best example would be some kind of mythology in which, thunderstorms are being created by some god. But now we have science which explains how thunderstorms appear in the world, and we see that there isn't any supernatural cause. So science now with these assumptions is limiting itself. Okay, only things in matter, only things natural exist, nothing supernatural. This is the best example of that. And I said naturalism or materialism because it is further described that only what exists is only matter in its interaction. So what we see is the domain of stuff that science is applied to. Science is only applied to the natural world and only to matter and its interactions. So interactions would be some forces of matter, magnetism, electromagnetism, actually, gravity, and all the fields, because they are also dependent on matter. There cannot be field without matter. Always there is matter in this equation. So what we see is, let's assume things exist. There is something, universe, world, reality, anything. But now we are closing the gap of knowledge. Let's say our initial gap was everything that exists. We are measuring things because we see, okay, I have a hand, so I'm measuring things that exist. I have some kind of desk here and so on. But now we are limiting ourselves, okay, only matter and its interaction exists, which in my opinion is stupid and in my opinion cannot show us the ultimate truth, because what if the truth is non-physical, non-material? What if it is beyond the domain? It's like we have the biggest bubble, which would mean like the entire existence, all the things that exist, but we have inside of it a smaller bubble of only natural world, only matter and its interactions. And science is only applied to this. And then another assumption, which I do not agree is, and it's a funny one, it is sometimes called rationalism, that everything that is within science should be understandable by humans, or let's say some kind of logical thing. So there is nothing, let's say, irrational completely, or there is nothing beyond our human understanding, which I am also opposed, and I think that science can actually debunk itself on this one, because we see that, for instance, evolution. I believe that we are more than just material human beings, these bodies, these advanced animals, advanced hominids, advanced monkeys. However, I think that we have also some kind of part of our brain, maybe it's even the dominant one, that is material part of thinking. And what science is trying to explain is that everything that science applies to can be understood by let's say our brains, our minds, our biological kinds of minds. And I see a quick debunking of it in science, because we see that how brains evolved. They evolved to fit evolutionary purposes. So they evolved in order for a particular organism to survive, let's say humans. So I say to myself, just speculating, what if our human minds are not capable of getting to the ultimate truth, because this ultimate truth was not needed for us to survive? We have, let's say, a bit more advanced brains or logic, etc. than other animals, but not all, because other are more advanced, like dolphins, in other kind of brain and mind things. However, what I mean is that, we are a bit more advanced, that we can speculate about the universe, we can measure, we can create stuff and put this stuff into space, let's say. But what if still we are limited, that just by using our brains and material biological minds, we wouldn't be ever, into searching for the ultimate truth. So I see even science, by the evolutionary branch and all of the advancements, can a bit debunk this idea, this primary notion, primary assumption in how the science works, in the philosophy and all the fundamentals of science, that everything should be based on rationalism. And I think, what if the rational mind wasn't there to explain the truth about the universe, but what if it was just for us to survive and to get better and to dominate the world and to dominate the other species, because probably this was why humans evolved in this route and not the other. So these are the two main assumptions of science that are limiting it, from the idea of getting into truth, getting into knowledge about the universe, to getting only the logical part, so the assumption of rationalism, and getting only the material part of the physical universe. So we see, and this is the image that is often overlooked when it comes to media, when it comes to learning science, that science isn't about the ultimate truth, but it is only about how the material world here rationally, logically works, here only in the material, physical realm, which is, I think, a good tool, because sometimes if I want to focus, let's say I want to repair a car, I don't need to, speculate and think of the entire universe. No, I need to have the applied knowledge on how to repair a particular car engine or anything that there is in this car. So I need the engineering knowledge. And the same here. If we want to discover the best way how the physical universe works, we will have to apply science, which is all about the physical material world, and we'll see, okay, biology works like that, physical reality works like that, these are the laws of Newton, these are the laws of the universe, but we'll be still limited, and we won't get the knowledge about the big picture of the entire thing, spirituality. And why this is important? This is important because, as I mentioned at the beginning, science is, at least since, the famous event of the worldwide, I don't want for the child to be taken away, but I think this was the apogeum of this propaganda. I would say that science is the only way we should, think when it comes to living here as human beings, that science is the only route. And science, according to this, yes?
Have you ever heard of Parmenides, the leader of the Eleatic school in
yes.
Graecia? So he's the guy who comes up with ontology, which is the rational basis for science. And he got there by going on a massive trip, right? Maybe a drug trip, maybe some sort of spiritual trip, but he goes outside of his body and he witnesses this queen of the night, and she tells him that A equals A. There cannot be no contradiction in the universe. And he's getting this from a spiritual vision. And that's the basis for science. So when you understand the irony of all these scientists saying we can't go back to the basis of science for our science now, it's kind of ridiculous.
I was actually going to say something like that, Headless, because it seems like to me, science now is basically just removing any spirituality whatsoever. Like, I get it. We have a physical brain and we use it to like wipe our ass and like go to the grocery store. But there is so many levels to that. You have your mind, which you get information all the time that is not from you sometimes. And you wonder, like, how am I able to process this? Where did I come from before I was born? That doesn't come from your physical brain. That comes from somewhere outside of yourself. So it's like science has completely removed the beautiful spiritual connectedness of everything.
Yes, these are two great ideas, great examples, and I wanted to go into the spirituality a little bit further, because this is, connecting what I've just talked about with the spirituality kind of thing. But let's say about the monopoly on knowledge. This is the bad, because nowadays science, as I mentioned at the beginning before explaining all of this, is saying us only science can lead you to the true knowledge about anything. But actually, as I mentioned, here are the limitations of science. So what if I am going beyond the domain of where the science is applied? Then, science, eliminate that. He's the scientist. This is a scam. This is some kind of grift, etc., hoax. And this is the bad thing, that science is having monopoly, because I understand that science could have monopoly on the material world because of all of their achievements. Let's say they figured out how, the physical laws, etc. Okay, they may be the leader in this kind of domain, but they are going into what is outside of their domain. And I often laugh about, science is telling us things about spirituality or something, but actually spirituality, God, and plenty aspects of religions are, not in the domain of science for science to comment it. So actually spirituality, any kind of metaphysics, beyond physics, it is all beyond the bubble of domain where science is applied. So science actually should not comment at all about that. Let's say I'm the mechanic, you're the biologist, and I know things about the mechanical stuff. Okay, this is maybe a bad example because I can tell you about the mechanical parts of our bodies, but I do not know shit about, biology, cells, and everything. And it would be like, oh, I am a mechanic, and I would tell you, no, you're wrong about being biologist. No, it is not about cells, mitochondria, and stuff like that. So actually anything metaphysical, spiritual should be, from definition that I mentioned, from the philosophy of science, outside of the domain of science. So in my opinion, science should not have any kind of dominion, any kind of monopoly on knowledge, because knowledge can exist outside of science. It can be knowledge of the things that are just outside the physical realm. And it connects to spirituality, of course, religion, and the thing that, science explains everything in the physical world. We do not need any kind of religion. We can be atheists. And I think I mentioned it at the end of the last conversation about my little conspiracy theory of the entire world and how it works. I think it's a step-by-step process of limiting our spirituality, ending in getting us as human beings into a complete physical, like getting us into the physical realm, blocking us from anything spiritual, mystical, out of physical, metaphysical, and maybe later turning us into robots, all the transhumanism agenda and so on. I think that this is one of the steps, and I think it manifests throughout the entire history, that we started, let's say, with just spiritual beliefs, then the first shamanism and so on, then religions. But still, for instance, first religions were polytheistic. They explained that, there are plenty of different forces of nature that those people thought were gods, etc. And then, we are being more and more limited when it comes to our spirituality, like closed in a smaller and smaller cage. Let's say the first stage was just pure spirituality, then shamanism, closer cage, then polytheistic religions, so still plenty of possibilities, but then limited also by Brahmins, for instance, in India, and other, kind of priests in other religions. Then monotheistic religions, so only one god, all the other gods do not exist, or all the other forces and gods and stuff are bad, etc. And this thing that there's hell and heaven, and you need to think like that and act like that in order to go to heaven. So the next limitation. And the furthest limitation would be, okay, there is no spirituality, there isn't heaven or hell, you die, it's over, you do not have any psychic abilities, there is nothing out of physical, there is nothing spiritual. And I think it's coming. And the last stage of that, this might, as I say, a little bit conspiracy theory. I do not know if it is correct, but there are plenty of arguments for it. And I think the next step would be, okay, people are so manipulated, even right now, but maybe let's say in 10, 20, 50 years, into believing that there is only the physical realm, there is nothing spiritual. They, gave up on the idea of spirituality. Now let's close them in some kind of robots, machines, connect them by chips in their brain, and so on and so on. And now we are fully limited from who we really are at a bigger picture. We are more and more limited, and then we are just just biological machines or part biological machines. Even at this point, we are part humans, part, of course, some kind of technology, AI, and we are the most limited. So this is my take on it.
I'm on board with that. I think that that could be very true. Also, I think that they target your different parts of your brain with pharmaceuticals, and everybody's on some kind of fucking pharmaceutical these days. So talk about shutting off your spirituality. A lot of like antidepressants, antipsychotic medication, the active ingredient is fluoride. They put fluoride in your water, you shower with it, brush your teeth with it, wash your clothes in it, then you take antidepressants that further calcifies your brain, and then we wonder how we got to like non-spiritual, I'm just, going along to get along. It's because they're actually inducing like a pharmaceutical lobotomy, and that's where we're at. I think that they would love to see us as robots, because then we're more easy to control.
Yes, also to add to that, it doesn't need to be like things we eat or we take some drugs, but it can be also, first one, propaganda and making us from little kids into only the left analytical, logical part of the brain. And you mentioned lobotomy, there were some kind of experiments of, how right hemisphere is acting, how left hemisphere is acting. And when they cut us out of the left hemisphere this time, people were having, spiritual things all the time. They even couldn't feel where there is a boundary between them and the outside world. They like couldn't, they couldn't analytically, logically 3D think at all. So I think that they want also us by just, practice, stimulating left side of the brain, killing any kind. This was actually, I think, clearly shown during the Cold War, postmodernism, here in Eastern Europe to just, everything gray, nothing, fun, nothing artistic, no artistic expression. You should be just like calculator, just, do maths, do physics, or learn to be a lawyer when it comes to humanity, but you do not have any artistic expression and so on. And I think this is the part that even through propaganda, and we do not need to eat anything, they can, get us like 80-90% into the left hemisphere, and we are very limited because even we are not using the full capacities of our brain, and maybe this right side of the brain is much more connected to spirituality or other parts like the pineal gland, and you mentioned calcification by fluoride and other stuff. But also nowadays we are in an age that they can go into two routes. One, they can analyze how the brain of you works, like, put a headset on you and check out to 70% about, according to them, what you think or what you are thinking about approximately, maybe not the entire thing you visualize and all the information, but they can predict what you are thinking about, so they can control you in this way. But they can also control you in a different way, that for instance, by putting electric signals in your brain, then they can like trigger memories. They can trigger certain thoughts about, okay, I'm hungry, I will go to eat something, and so on. So maybe, future technology could easily, not like with advanced something, no, just with current technology, make some implants into your head, or maybe with some nanotechnology that you are not even aware of, and enable it to put advertisements in your mind. You know what I mean? To some extent, I think that our imagination is actually connected to something beyond the physical one, but I think that they can dominate your brain easily. And if they dominate constant simulation, in constant stimulation or when we are in the survival state, we are not thinking about the universe and stuff like that, how it works, about philosophy. No, we are shrinked. And I think that this is the technology that they can do. We do not even need to eat anything to do that. But this is a bit dystopian, and I'm optimistic. I think that, maybe it's not our scenario for the near future.
Something I want to say between Julia and you, Alexander, I thought of Ellen McGilchrist. I think I'm saying his name right. Somebody that I've wanted to get on the show. He has an amazing book called The Master and His Emissary. I have it, and I've only like read a little bit here and there, but I've watched him do presentations on it and talk about it. And he says, like right now, he thinks there's a huge problem with that. Like we're all basically like way too much on the left side of the brain, and that that part of the brain will like start to lie to you if you get like scared or afraid to make sense of stuff. He says, so like we're kind of like creating our own realities to deal with life at this point and not acknowledging for what it really is. It's fucking free.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
100.
agree.
I think that they've been developing this kind of technology from like the 60s, though. I think as soon as it rolled out like TV, yeah, and it's like you were saying they could put something in your head that makes you crave Taco Bell all the time. Well, that shit is already happening because, with the way they advertise drugs, food, everything, flashing lights, constant programming. I think that they've already found a way without even touching you physically to disrupt how your brain is supposed to work. Just from like watching movies, shows, whatever.
Electronics doesn't even help.
Yeah, your phone.
Yes, I'm also afraid, all the electromagnetic connection and, some newer things like, Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G, and so on. But I think that, maybe in their secret, like, experiments, or maybe in the near future, they would be able, to do everything remotely. We are just going, or maybe they will input you some kind nano stuff that you are not even aware of. You maybe even just breathed it in while you were outside of your home or even at your home, and you're walking, and then you're doing something that it is not you, but they controlling you through your nervous system. And nervous system is actually, I think, easy to control because it is electromagnetic to some extent, electric. So different impulses, just like I mentioned, this is an old actual technology, as you mentioned, 60s, 70s probably, that just putting different impulses in special parts of the brain can result in now you remember your most traumatic one. You have, like a vision, like a memory, or they make you hungry and so on. The same with manipulation. I mentioned fluoride, but other chemicals that are, messing up with the hormones. They can do a lot of things with our body. And that's why I think all the propaganda and all the things it is going toward is eliminating spirituality, anything beyond physical. Because if you think that you're only the physical material body, machine, let's say biological, you are limited. And you think maybe even if you are aware of what we are talking about, that they can control you in all the possible ways, you are like, oh, I can't do anything about that. They will get the nano stuff. I will, do that. I will maybe even kill some people and so on. You are not aware of that. You are actually aware, but you are, in this depressing state. And I think that's why they want to kill the spirituality, to say, okay, you see now our enemies, let's say, USA and other countries like China or Russia, these countries can do that. So you have to abide us, or if it's vice versa here on the eastern side of the world, you need to be careful. Western things bad, they can control you, and you need to obey us, the government, and so on. So I think this is why it's going into the material one, because if you know about spirituality, if you truly experience it, you are not fearing anything. The death is not the end, and so on. So you have a different mindset to go, even if it existed, into this negative dystopian stuff. You have a completely different attitude towards it.
I just wanted to add that there are definitely these modern, really institutionalizations to kind of make people not be sensitive or intuitive, and even that word has a kind of trigger to it, right? Like, oh, you're so sensitive. People use that as a really derogatory, in a sense, kind of word, when actually
that's
it's
programming,
really,
subconscious programming.
It's an example of programming, which we do to ourselves, I think, more often.
I need to be hard. I cannot be sensitive.
Right. That's a great example. The hardness and softness. Like with Tai Chi for health, we want to integrate softness and sensitivity and not be hard, because when you're rigid, you really you lose your ability. In flexibility, there is the potential
Yes.
for rigidity. And in rigidity, there's no flexibility. And a lot of this modern institutionalization and even verbal tendencies and just cultural tendencies to be hard and rigid and not sensitive to the spiritual or non-physical, I think may start within ourselves reflective of the theory that our very eyesight and hearing and even the spectrum of what we might think about is said to be biologically hindered in order to maintain a survival and fight the bobcats and the wolves and the random bulls that come out of nowhere that you have to survive, and getting food and so on. So all these the base programming and base place that we might be in was the more frequent place, right, where we're just focusing on survival. So I think in reflect to that, these biological circumstances, now we have these modern examples, as you laid out so eloquently, Aleksander, that maybe come from the same biological tendency to be in survival mode as a way to survive, and not really look at these energies and these different qualities, and or are very people might call it our dark side, or our dark aspect of our consciousness. People really don't want to look at what is the biggest thing holding us back most often, ourselves. Usually
Yes.
we're our own worst enemy, and people do not want to look at that
It's really
in depth anyway.
Yes, I agree.
Just to build, no, I wasn't trying to disagree, just to build on like
Yes.
we hold ourselves back, certainly institutionally and personally.
Yes, I think it's a great example of, how society, or I mentioned the Eastern side, or postmodernism one, this, I don't want to call it philosophy, school of thought or anything. I think it's like global phenomenon that, make you fit, that you need to fit into that. And there are plenty of different ideologies that are, throwing people into a particular route when actually you can be free, and you will see that, it's just a route. Just as science, as I mentioned at the beginning, is limited in its own weight, and science is only, I would say, science is only a method of understanding physical, with emphasis reality, and who knows, maybe even not entirely, if we take into the consideration this rationalism thing that, maybe our minds are not supposed to know everything.
Yeah, I think depending on where you are, even emotionally, I think there's certain things you should understand at given times. Something like that. So to explain. One thing I did want to bring up, it's a little bit kind of off. I mean, it's about the science community. It's not kind of the way that you were going at it, but it's just a way for me to have a shameless plug for the show as well. One thing I do think is important within the science community, and I think a lot of people kind of sleep on it too. It was interesting for me when Lisa pitched it to the show, or to me. It's not my topic, so I can't pat myself on the back. It was hers. But even with Maxwell's family owning so much of the publication of scientific papers for so long, they basically controlled science in certain aspects.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes,
it's just
about
McGraw-Hill.
science, about different, even outside of science, there are people who own a lot. Even nowadays with the food industry, there are also, like, you see, okay, we have 5 big companies that control all the 80% of the food, and you will see, okay, but all these 5 are still under control of the one majorly, so.
Right. McGraw-Hill was the textbook maker that Maxwell owned for about 3 years, and changed all of their policies, how they, wrote their books and everything else. So that was coming straight out of this Epstein network.
Yeah, no, that is true. And I think for some reason, I think they had to do something with like German or Nazi stuff with McGraw-Hill. I don't know why. Can't remember that.
Germans actually, because of it is very German and Nazis actually was a very interesting case because of their isolation from the outside world during the World War. They actually started with completely different ideas, and the Nazi science of 1944, so before the last year of the world, in comparison to, let's say, American science and global science outside of Nazi Germany, was completely different just after a few, like 4 or 5 years being isolated during during the Second World War, which shows you that maybe, you know, sometimes isolation can be a good thing because you won't think the same things as the other ones all over the world are thinking. So I think it's a good example that, you know, we say, oh, science, everyone agrees with science and so on, but here you will see that after all these years of isolation, just a few years actually of isolation, their science, their physics was a completely different, you know, kind of thing. Even they went back to the beginnings, and some of the prior things when it comes to physics, they, you know, say, no, it's probably a little bit different. They weren't right in plenty of things, but actually, when Western sciences discovered that, they were heavily inspired that, wait, what is it? So...
Are you
That's a
talking
good
about
example.
you're talking about Nazis?
Yes, Nazi
Whoa.
science was completely different. And that's why, you know, all these conspiracies about NASA and their influence with the Nazi scientists, because plenty of Nazi scientists, in order not to be killed, their benefit, but also benefit of the United States and other countries to have the best scientists on their team, were, you know, taken, not killed, and taken into the USA, plenty of Nazi scientists. And it turned out that during, as I mentioned, 4 or 5 years of their isolation, their science was like a sci-fi one. That's why they were, you know, all these hidden projects like UFO, Die Glocke. These were here in Poland. Plenty of these projects were created here in Poland, actually. Die Glocke, their kind of UFO, this Hornet kind of craft that later inspired the American stealth, these fighters, which are like out of sci-fi movies. So Nazi science was really out of this world, because they were also heavily influenced before that by occultism. Because before even the like NSDAP, so the party nationalists of Hitler, nationalist party, became a power in Germany, even before that, at the end of 1800s, at the beginning of the 1900s, they had their roots in occultism, because plenty of their members were into that. Later, when the Nazis came into power in Germany, there even started projects, as I mentioned, of this physics, but also projects on non-material stuff. Projects about uncovering hidden history. Even, you know, Himmler, so, you know, one of the biggest guys when it comes to Nazis after Hitler, was trying to search for Atlantis. And now you see, for instance, I don't know if you know Flint Dibble and other skeptics who are saying, oh, Graham Hancock is bad because of his Ancient Apocalypse series and so on. They are telling that this idea of trying to search for lost civilizations is racist, is fascist, is Nazi even. Some of the people, maybe not this one that I mentioned, but other in this kind of field, are telling us, because throughout the history, people were using that for bad things. But you know why they are telling us, no, we cannot search for Atlantis because we would be racist, Nazi, and so on, because we are, you know, no, I think it shouldn't be like that. And I think it's a bad thinking, illogical thinking, even in my opinion, that, you know, you take these people into this, like, oh, this Atlantis hunters or lost civilizations hunters, they are racist, or these methods are racist. No, just racists, fascists, Nazis were using this knowledge for their purposes, because Nazis wanted to show that their Aryan race, so the Germans, true Germans, were coming from some kind of lost civilization like Atlantis. They wanted a proof, because they really were racist, and they thought that their Aryan race is superior in comparison to others. But they were using this Atlantis knowledge that we may talk about for bad purposes. But it doesn't mean that Atlantis Atlantis hunting is Nazi in itself. No, it isn't, but plenty of people interpret it like that. So Nazis, there are crazy stories. They even wanted to recreate some kind of UFO, interdimensional UFO, no, like a physical one for space travels outside of the space-time reality after the channeling. There were some kind of medium, it was before the war for sure, and they were, channeling some kind of papers, like blueprints of this UFO craft. There are plenty of stories like that about the Nazis, and they were trying to replicate it. And because of the roots in occultism, channelings, they were much more open for different ideas. That's why Die Glocke, which was meant to be some kind of anti-gravity thing, according to them. Maybe it doesn't exist, the thing like anti-gravity, maybe, but they were thinking, and okay, let's experiment, and they came to plenty of new things. They invented new true things in physics because they were very open about all of that. They wanted to create UFOs, they wanted to harness
Alexander,
the psychic powers. Yes?
Right. Well, Alexander, in terms of their moral rejection of Western physics, it really came down to this Einstein idea, right? Because they really rejected Einstein hard. Like, he was very big in the West, and they're like, we want nothing to do with that Swedish guy or the Swiss guy.
Jewish guy. He was a Jew.
Guy.
I don't want this podcast to be taken off. Sorry, Nick, but they didn't like Jews, and Einstein was a Jew. So sorry.
But you had the same kind of rejection going on in the Soviet Union, where they were rejecting Western science for a different type of agricultural science, and that created major problems in the Soviet Union as well.
Yes, I agree with you. And even they rejected because of their philosophical basis in Marxism, in communism. They rejected the idea of spirituality. When the Bolsheviks in like 20s got into the power, they closed most of the churches, and they wanted to kill religions. They sometimes, during events that they were not doing well, were taken back this religion when they needed to, but they were anti-religious. They thought that spirituality is, stupid, doesn't exist. They were materialists, hard materialists and atheists. And because of that, when they found out about psychic remote viewing and all of the psychic phenomena like channelings, they were heavily researching it. Western world was a little bit back in that because they thought, okay, Western world was like, oh, this doesn't exist. But actually, Soviet scientists were thinking that spiritual phenomena and all the mediumship, psychic stuff is a material phenomenon. So they got it into their paradigm. As I mentioned, that spirituality is outside of the scientific paradigm, and that's why science is not like saying that mediumship and psychic capabilities are real, because these are outside of the physical realm. But Soviet scientists were thinking, but maybe they're physical. I do not agree with them at all, but because of that, they implemented it into their scientific community, and psychic stuff was so heavily researched in USSR, like they were really, really into it because they thought it is some kind of material stuff, and that's why then later USA was, wait, they are investigating it, so maybe we should too. And that's how the Ingos one, the famous remote viewer, and other later were involved into that. So I think that Soviet Union was the first in that, and then later USA was that we should investigate it too. Like, our enemies are doing that, we should too. So there are plenty of interesting cases showing us different kinds of science in the Soviet era, in the Nazi stuff. I think it is not only the rejection of Einstein was a part of that. Like, they even say, I was in my high school, I had major, but in high school, like extended version of history, like different subjects, and history was extended, and it was focused on the times from 1900s up until the end of the World War II. So it was heavily focused on this period. And I remember there were even some quotes that from scientists back then during the Nazi time, that we won't accept this Jewish thing that Einstein is propagating. They were, so racist that no, it's Jewish thing, it's not true, it's propaganda and so on. They were telling like that. It was a part of rejecting Einstein's gravity and so on. But part of that was also that when the war started, they were completely isolated. It wasn't like nowadays they can browse the internet and check what scientific advancements are. Back then, the scientific research was not that big like nowadays. So in 4 or 5 years, Nazis were actually not informed on everything that was happening all over the world when it comes to science. And this was the part isolation and part rejection of the Western one. In the USSR, similar. That part was the rejection. There is nothing beyond matter. There is only matter. We are atheists. We are socialists. We are materialists. And also part of the isolation of the Western. The Western is bad. Here, even in Poland, it was up until the 1890s, so 1989. So like 30 plus years ago, we were under the communist regime, and all the Western stuff was bad. Trust me, even I was born in 2003, so long ago that, and I remember, some kind of artifacts, like things from before we were integrated into the Western world, that everything on the West is bad, everything from Russia, from Soviet Union is good, and we should reject everything, the Western depravity and so on. So yes, these are showing us different kinds of worldviews even.
What's interesting is the artifacts that are left over from this era that I think still don't get a lot of attention. So for instance, in the West, we have Western science calling certain obscure kind of effects cavitation effects. Now, they don't go into any detail in what these cavitation effects are, but this is a very clear example of them sort of relegating these different effects within science as a thing that they don't fully explain, but they point at it and they're like, well, we can explain this. It's the cavitation effect. Let's move on to the next thing. It's kind of funny. So they're describing the same things in different ways with varying amounts of focus being placed on them. And usually what we end up seeing is that they don't really do a good job of explaining it too well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are plenty of examples. Any kind of comment or?
Did anybody have any?
I was actually.
Sorry, Julia. I'll go really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think that everything you said, I totally agree with. Like, I think one tool that I like to say for people to like take sort of agency, be agential in and of themselves, take full ownership of their own will, maybe, is to, quoting Andrew McLuhan, grandson of Marshall McLuhan, but he says, seize the means of perception. So I think a lot of magic starts in perception, like you were talking about, Aleksander. The Nazi phenomena, I call it we was Kangs. All occultists do this. They always project themselves into the primordial past as the lineage progenitors. It's every occult group. There's zero that don't do this. So it is what it is. And I think the last thing I wanted to comment on is, well, I forgot. So, but anyways, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that people, occultism as a source of like wisdom or knowledge. I'm 100% there. I think Nick's 100% there. I think we're all 100% there. And like, I think it's not about like the dualism of like materialism versus spiritualism. I like to take a non-dual approach. That's just obviously because I'm Buddhist. So, but I think we have to go like beyond the paradigms, like exactly what you're saying. Like it's about pushing the ideas outward, and like it doesn't matter. Maybe an idea is bad, maybe it's good. Like we have to see, and we shouldn't be we was Kangs because not all their ideas are good, but we don't have to discard everything that came before. Just kind of see where things go.
Soviets wanted to discard almost anything that was of the Russian or Eastern history. They wanted, to start with a blank page, finish this imaginary war of classes, the conflict between classes, and start anew with a perfect socialistic society. So it's another lesson that we shouldn't, we shouldn't also be too much attached to, of course, the past stuff, but we shouldn't try to eliminate it at all. Just as you mentioned, old idea isn't a bad idea at all.
Lysenkoism is the word I was looking for before. So that's the sort of Soviet response to agriculture, was this Lysenkoism, which end up killing fields all over the place. So that's always been used as this example of pseudoscience too.
Yes, it's a kind of example of pseudoscience, yes. I think it's in Polish Lysenko or something like that, yes.
Didn't Hitler like send a whole like brigade of motherfuckers to Tibet too?
Yes.
Like
to Pumapunku even.
Yeah, because he was like looking for what is the place in Tibet, the spiritual place that's like,
well, they say
lost?
It's Shambhala, right?
Shambhala, yes.
They say Shambhala. Yeah. Shambhala is a real place, but I'll tell you where that place is. That place is in your mind. The mind palace is in your mind, obviously. And so it's not a real place. So let me just be very clear about that, set the record straight, like straight up. So it's a place that you construct actually in your mind during a visualization when you recite mantras. So it's it's like a ritual, it has a ritual kind of maybe it's the higher place. Maybe you're going to a hyperspace kingdom. Maybe you're like, teleporting in your mind. But in reality, it really takes place in your consciousness. I know Aleksander doesn't love that when I used that word last time, but I think it's fair.
No, actually, I'm not into Shambhala as searching for a physical place. No, only like Atlantis, Lemuria, and stuff like that. So I would agree that probably if you have the knowledge or experience about that yes, Shambhala could be like that. But, it can be also what you're telling about as the best example of, I think that in the previous conversation I was talking about of esoteric and exoteric meaning. It's like understanding the Bible. What, people going to church are mostly understanding is the exo, the outer part of the meaning. Okay, Jesus died on the cross, there were 12 apostles, etc., etc. But the esoteric meaning, the hidden occult inside of it is that, okay, this may be interpreted as a real story, but it has also a second meaning of metaphorical story. Jesus being born at the same time as there is this sun is in this lowest point on the sky, etc. So I think it's a good example of how Nazis were foolish about the Shambhala, probably that the Shambhala story
they missed the memo.
Yes, exoterically. Yeah. It's okay, lost civilization and so on, but esoterically, it's something different, just as you mentioned before.
They brought back some artifacts, though. That's where the swastika came from. But if you really think about it, it's like rules for thee, but not for me. We're allowed to have occultism, spirituality, looking for lost civilizations. We're into all this shit. We're channeling gods. We're doing all this, but you guys shouldn't have spirituality. Yes. Fuck you. You need to be completely cut off from all of this shit that we got going on, because if you knew what we knew, then we couldn't control you.
Yes, it's a great point. I always talk about it. It's a hypocrisy of plenty of elites. I think it was even during the reign of Elizabeth I that Elizabeth said, okay, we destroy all the occult, all the esoteric stuff in our country, but at the same time as she was saying that to public and, persecuting any kind of heresies, she was having a personal occultist and she was using him for her own purposes. So the same example as you said.
That's what I'm talking about. They don't want us to know what they know.
Yes,
Well, I was going to say, even if you look like Abraham Lincoln was having like seances in the White House. All of them know this stuff. They're all into it, but they want to cut us off from that. It's like, oh, okay, only you guys can know.
You will be slaves.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
I just want to shout out that Hegel is actually Kabbalah. If you really understand Hegel, it's also Kabbalah. I'm not saying I agree with it, just saying it is Kabbalah. And Lysenko is the father of modern epigenetics. I'm not saying I agree with Lysenko. I don't agree with Lysenko. But I think that you, just like we're saying, is like you can look at wisdom science for specific seeds of knowledge. And so in that case, the seed of epigenetics comes from Lysenko. So I don't agree with him, but again, you don't have to agree with everybody to be able to sort of look at their work and see, you know, what is going to be generative. And I think that that's a lot of like the new Aeon is like, it's going to be like, what is actually generative, what is going to produce fruits, and what is going to like take humanity. Maybe it's just all about taming your consciousness, like I think, but maybe it's like, you know, maybe it is finding Atlantis. Like, who knows, really? I think that that's an interesting way to frame it. Like, we don't really know, but there's something, I think there's something fresh about being like optimistic instead of being like doomer.
Well, you're approaching the monopolistic angle there, so there might be elements of Lysenko that carry over, but in the wholesale rejection of anything, you always end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and you don't see anything of value in it. So that's the big problem with monopolistic science, is that you can never take the elements and reformat them and use them in other ways.
Yes, yes.
I believe I don't know if it was Lysenko, the same mode of agriculture, but Stalin infamously grew in Marxist theory, you know, everyone coming together is equal. He put forth that idea into agriculture and would grow many different types of wheat in the same fields, and they all failed. Or one would do well, right? Because each different wheat had its own needs that were slightly different than the others. And so, of course, the Marxist theory, which is you know, very subjective, did not work on very, you know, objective agricultural processes, which they thought it would.
Any more comments or something else?
Yeah,
I do think, oh, sorry, Nick.
No, go for it, please.
Sorry, no, I thought it was interesting, Alexander, that you spoke about the Soviet kind of marriage of so their psychical research was even way more than the Americans. Like, we talk about like obviously MK and all of that stuff, but the Soviets had like hundreds of programs running that were identical or similar or even worse. And so I just want to say that, like, yeah, the Soviets did reject the supernaturalist elements, but they definitely embraced the psychical ones. But there is something useful even in that framework, right? Like, that's also what's interesting, is like, if you take away the supernatural sort of elements in the layer of story, then you're actually talking about sort of our own cosmogenesis, like our own like story of humanity, rather than a story of like the deities or whatever. You're talking about like fundamentally about us. So I applaud them for that, but I agree that you have to have the spiritual, you have to have like there's a metaphysical layer. Like, ontology is everything, right? I think we all agree on that. Like,
yes, it's just that Soviets, you know, labeled the psychic part as a material one, because they thought that, you know, the psychic would turn out to be something like gravity or like force of electromagnetism, that maybe right at their time they do not understand it, but maybe in the future they will be able to measure it physically, but they couldn't do that. And there were plenty even of prototypes of, you know, some kind of machines that could, you know, see the auras, etc. And some of them, you know, allegedly work, some of them were a complete crap, because, you know, it turned out that it wasn't within this realm that they were thinking this psychic capabilities are within.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to ask or add anything before we wrap it up?
I can finally jump in. Okay, so when y'all was talking about science earlier, I look at it like this. I think science is trying to catch up with what our theories and ideas are, and because they don't have the ability to do so, they push it to the side until something finally comes up, and somebody in that, you know, typical in that field, like at modern academia and so on and so forth, they don't want to lose their tenure or their seats in their, you know, wherever they're at. So they decide not to say anything. So a lot of times, a lot of them just keep it hush hush, but they be in their houses practicing the same shit that we be practicing: tarots, Ouija boards, astral projection, lucid dreaming. They do that, but they don't want to put their name on it because they don't want to run the risk of somebody talking about them. And a good example of that right now is Avi Loeb, right? He keeps thinking that thing is an extraterrestrial, right? But people are saying that the facts are saying that it's an asteroid. So Now it's up to when it finally shows up, how are we able to prove it otherwise, right? Because we got a person from Harvard, from modern academia, who's actually putting their name out there on the line and so on and so forth. And, you know, people are looking at him like he's crazy, but this dude has a degree in this field, right? You know what I'm saying? So I mean, unless you have a degree in that field, what can you really say to, you know, counter that? And that's when it comes up to, how do they prove their facts? What can they give to us, the lamest people out the group, you know, the non-Harvards and, you know, all these other individuals? What can you give us that proves what you say and backs up what you say with, you know, clear-cut evidence, right? Like the gun is at the scene with the fingerprints type thing. I can see that. That's clear evidence. What evidence do you have that portrays that? And I think science, a lot of people are very timid. They don't want to be the roaring wolf that goes out there and says, hey, you guys are fucking. They want to say, hey, you guys are misinterpreting, and they're being sweet and nice about it. Before we even launched this show, Nick, we was talking about how many times have you went to somebody, said, excuse me, and then the second, third time you had to say, excuse me, motherfucker, just to get their attention. And that's what we need, is we need a moment like that to get everybody's attention. And it's not going to help by being the sweet, nice little people that we used to be. It's about time we start, you know, roaring with the microphones, tearing the walls off to Jerusalem, and this, that, and the third type stuff.
Very well said, sir. Thank you.
May I add to the idea of the powerful people, even stately people, using these occult or metaphysical or alchemical ideas? Just recently, Putin and Z and what is the North Korean guy met and were walking around, and on a hut mic, they were talking about how at 70, you're just a baby nowadays, and that they could live to be 150. And so they were very much interested in these alchemical ideas, but they were talking about very physical, surgical things, I believe. But interesting, longevity and immortality, always a search for humanity. And even just randomly, they're walking along and spoke about it.
And that's funny you say that. And I'll say this last thing. The Gnostics believe in eternal life. You just had to have knowledge within to achieve that. That's why they were so dangerous, and that's why they were looked at as evil, because if you could live long, you can make a lot of different changes, right? Whether it's for the good or the bad. A good person lives long enough, they can make some changes. A bad person lives long enough, they can make some changes. I mean, it's been shown throughout historical events, right? Yeah. But the problem is, most of the time, the nice ones usually don't be able to make the changes that they want to, because they're being too nice at times, and they're not roaring and letting people know, hey, this has got to be done the right way, and this is how it's going to be. Excuse me, motherfucker. That type of stuff.
I love it, dude. Thank you, Tara. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Ellis,
I just want to say this is a great discussion. I think once we go back to the philosophy of science and start to deconstruct it where it starts at instead of where everything has ended up, that's when we can start to really make the changes, because a lot of scientific people hear these kind of things and they apply it to their own lives, and they look at what they're doing, and it creates a sense of self-awareness. And I think that's at the fundamental level of the understanding of science is self-awareness. Like, that's one of the first things you go into objective states, by understanding yourself and seeing yourself and understanding where your biases are and everything else, and being able to identify that is the first goal in producing good science, is being able to identify the pre-existing biases. And all the problems with separation and all the rest of these things, like you were talking about, once these different facets of different countries and geographies that break off from one another, if they had that self-awareness, they could not only take those elements that they've developed independently, but integrate them in a much more, rationalist framework that opens other people up to new ideas. But, as long as it's all being dictated by war and death and killing, you're not going to get that, and the biases are going to get worse.
I have just one thing to add to that, actually, Headless. You inspired me. I think, the concept of, science as we know it right now is like Fiskar scissors and, preschool shit, fucking putting blocks together and stuff. But if you go back, ancient Egypt, and they had fucking the 7 sacred sciences. Okay. That's what they had. They were way more advanced than us. What we have now is dog shit compared to what they knew. And the 7 sacred sciences, you know, they had like arithmetic and whatever, but they also incorporated spirituality and extra dimensional type of shit into their 7 sacred sciences. So when we think of science now, it's like fucking Bill Nye and some, you know, school program, stupid bullshit. But what they had, they could like the architecture, everything. It was a mixture of spirituality and science, and it was actually a really amazing thing. I honestly think that the Egyptians are like just a remnant of these civilizations that Alexander was talking about, Atlantis, all of these places. So yeah, I mean, I think that they target us on a biological level. You know, if you guys have heard about the God gene or whatever, they're trying to basically inject us to death so that we're not able to use that part of our brain and part of our body. So yeah, yay for science shutting down our God gene and calcifying our brain. That, I mean, I think it's turned into almost like a dystopian nightmare science. It's not anything like what it used to be.
Hell yeah. Amen to that.
Well, the institutions are sort of crumbling. I think we're seeing a sort of, deconstruction or maybe like an incoherence of the Saturnian institutions, because institutions are both Saturnian and solar in some ways, because they have an outward presenting face and a more occulted layer. So I think definitely we're seeing an icing out of like people's perceptions of the institutions. They're kind of ignoring it. And I think a lot more people are interested in like metaphysics and the things that Alexander talks about and that we all talk about. So I think that's I'm very optimistic. I have to say, like, I feel like people are really hungry for it, want to hear it, are like interested in like a totally new way. It's not so dogmatic as it was during COVID times. And we can all be a lot more open-minded and try and like figure it out for ourselves.
I love it. Well said, both of you. Before we wrap it up, we'll let everybody plug their shows again real quick. Go ahead, Julia. Let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I have this conversation. I could talk about it all day.
Mhm.
I have Cosmic Peach podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Occult Reject part-time. You can find me on Cult of Conspiracy podcast every Saturday. I'm everywhere and nowhere. So thank you for having me though. Love being an Occult Reject.
Thank you very much for coming on, Julia. Yes, she's like an egregore. She's everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, Jin the Ninja, what is going on, sir?
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the panel, and of course, Alexander. This was a great part 2, and I always really enjoy hearing you, and I could probably listen for longer and not speak so much, but appreciate it. And yeah, if you want to check me out, Jin the Ninja at Wukong Reborn, WKONG Reborn. That's my personal account on X, Twitter, at Threshold Saints, which is for both IG and also X, Twitter. That's just the show account. And then the Grey Lodge, which you can follow us on YouTube and as well on X live, a Friday night Gnostic Mass every Friday night, speculative Gnosticism. So come expand your mind.
There you go. Very nice. And Headless Giant.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Alexander. This has been a great little interview. I think a lot of people are hungry for this kind of knowledge so that they can have, some sort of ammunition to fight back against the people trying to fill them up with all sorts of science fluids. And, we got to have that ammunition. So you can find me on X and on YouTube. Look for the Headless Giant. And on Thursday nights and on Sunday mornings, we have a show. Tomorrow it's going to be the Trilogues. And on Thursday, we take your emails. And if you send me an email with your occult/paranormal/interesting dream experience, Nick will send you some free stickers. So go ahead and send that to the Headless Giant at gmail.com or Headless Giant Podcast at gmail.com. And we'll hear from you later. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. And yes, send those stories over to Headless. And Ethan, my man.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alexander. That was awesome. Yeah, check us out tomorrow. Headless and Ricardo and I will be discussing contemporary ideas and different ideas every week. And yeah, I'm on all the usual social media, and I got a couple of books out there actually exploring non-physical topics, so a lot of it. So yeah, again, Alexander, that was awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Oh yeah, thank you for joining us, Ethan and Tyrone, sir.
Hey, I appreciate it, Nick. Alexander, that was a great presentation, man. Like I said, man, you always come with the good stuff, the fire, the good information, the knowledge that we need. I really do appreciate that. Everything you can find on me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. I just created a Rumble account where I'm actually going to actual historical places. I appreciate that, Alexander. I'm going to actual historical places. The last one I went to was just Fort George Historic Site in Georgia. I was representing Occult Rejects with the shirt. So, I was out there representing. I've got to say, he doesn't promote his book, so I do. The geometry, get his book, The Geometry of How to Meditate. And then I got Alexander's book. Get his book also. I always actually I have a couple of Ethan's books. I'm just going to, the next time he's on with me, I'm going to promote the other one. So I'm just gonna keep it going for him since he forgets a lot. But I appreciate it, y'all.
Yeah, no, thank you. And finally, Alexander, and please let everybody know about your books and stuff that you got as well.
Yes, you can find me on many social media like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Just the best way is copy paste my name and surname, Aleksander Czeszkiewicz. Sometimes the English one is with global, so Aleksander Czeszkiewicz global, because I have also a Polish one. But you will see which one is which one by the language, so don't worry. And my book is Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, just as Tyrone is showing us. It's on Amazon in plenty of English-speaking regions like USA, Canada, Australia. Just, again, copy-paste the title Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been or my name and surname, and you will find it in English. Thank you once again. Thank you for all the good things you were talking about. I really am happy that you liked. I see the comments also. People liked that everyone here liked what I had to say. And I can't wait for the talk about Atlantis. That will be good too. Thank you once again, Nick.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for bringing that up. I was going to leave the listeners with that. If you enjoyed this show, hopefully within a few weeks, we'll have this man back on again, and we'll be talking about Atlantis. I'm looking very, very much forward to that. Again, Alexander, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a great chat, always a great discussion, for real. And, the chat loved it, and I appreciate everybody that was in the chat on all channels that it was streaming out to. That's what's up. A lot of you are there from the beginning till end, and you all had great stuff to say. That's why we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.